Live from GPB News, this is a special edition of Political Rewind, the 2017 Atlanta mayoral runoff debate. I'm Bill Nigut. As many people know, Atlanta voters go to the polls just 1 week from today to cast ballots in the runoff race between Mary Norwood and Keisha Lance Bottoms. Our goal today is to give voters the chance to hear just where these two candidates stand on a variety of issues important to the future of the city as Election Day approaches. I'm joined for the questioning by my Political Rewind colleague, Jim Galloway. He's the lead political writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and by my longtime friend, WSB-TV's anchor, Monica Pearson, who now hosts a new show, Seat at the Table, here for GPB. It's good to be back with you, Monica.
Thank you, Bill.
Before we meet the candidates, let's hear just a little bit about what's on the minds of Atlanta voters as they get set to go to the polls.
I'd like to see the next mayor of Atlanta maximize the use of heavy rail in the suburbs.
I just want to see more diversity in the Atlanta city government.
I would like to see the next mayor of Atlanta take on the sex trafficking issue that is crazy here in Atlanta.
What I want to see from the next mayor is really just transparency.
I like to see him cut out all the stealing in Atlanta, stop the crime, and put more police officers out there.
I'd like to see the next mayor of Atlanta work on traffic.
What I really want to know is with the next mayor of Atlanta, what's really going to be done with all the gentrification.
I am concerned about corruption, but I'm also concerned about crime.
I would like to see the next mayor of Atlanta lead Atlanta in the way that it needs to be led from the leaders of Atlanta before. You know, your Martin Luther Kings, your Maynard Jacksons, your Anthony
The most important
Youngs.
thing to me is the corruption. I'm tired of seeing corruption in City Hall. I mean, that's basically what I'm voting about.
The voice of Atlanta voters, and we'll get to a lot of the issues they discussed during the next hour. So now let's meet the candidates. Keisha Lance Bottoms is a two-term member of the Atlanta City Council. She serves her district in southwest Atlanta. She's also been the executive director of the Atlanta Fulton County Recreational Authority. She's a graduate of the Georgia State University College of Law and has practiced law in Atlanta for some 20 years. Mary Norwood has served 3 terms in the Atlanta City Council, in 2013 becoming a citywide councilwoman at large. She's had a long career as a business executive in a variety of fields: broadcasting, real estate, the internet phone business. And this is the second time she's been in a runoff election for mayor. In 2009, Norwood lost by a narrow margin to Kasim Reed. So as we begin, I just want to point out that we're not going to follow the formal, stiff rules of a standard debate, because we're hoping to encourage the candidates to have a more informal conversation about the issues. Our hope is that this elicits not just an understanding about the difference that they have between them, but also helps illuminate clearly the weaknesses and strengths of the city of Atlanta today. So first of all, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you for having us. Thank
Jim
you.
Galloway, I'm going to let you start, please.
All right. Through the expansion of MARTA, some airport improvements online, a T-Splost, and other pots of money, the next mayor of Atlanta will have her hands on at least $12 billion in contracts. That's likely to be an unprecedented sum. We have 3 federal investigations going on in City Hall right now, and 4 guilty pleas. Mayor Reed has said his office is cooperating with federal authorities. This question is for both of you, and it comes in 2 parts. Do you believe this administration has done enough on its own to root out corruption within City Hall? And 2, both of you, as experienced, longtime members of the City Council, please point us to something that you've done personally to address the problem of corruption here.
Who do you want to start with, Jim?
Let's start with Ms. Bottoms, if we can.
And thank you again for having me today. I think the fact that we are even talking about corruption means that enough has not been done to address it. Anytime that you have talks of ethical violations within government, then it really casts a pall over the entire government, and there's no place for corruption inside of City Hall. I think that the most important thing that we can do, one, is to publicly say that we don't have any tolerance for unethical behavior or corruption inside of City Hall. And I think that will translate to our workforce. But also, we have to make sure that we have policies in place. I think our shortcomings have been that we have put too much focus on people and not enough focus on the process. By that, I mean our procurement officer, our chief procurement officer, had been with the city for over 20 years, expanding multiple administrations.
He's one of those who have been indicted, Adam Smith.
That's right. This was a man who had been at a major law firm and had some other accolades. And so I think that there was trust put in him, but not enough attention paid to what was happening within his department. And so as we address corruption, the first thing we have to do is make sure there is a complete audit of our procurement department so we'll even know what we are dealing with on day one. The other thing that we need to do is make sure that we transfer our process from a paper-based process, which we have now. Right now, if you place a bid in the city of Atlanta, it can cost you upwards of $100,000. You're coming in with boxes and boxes of paper. Transform it into an electronic process.
Ms. Norwood, can we get a response from you?
Absolutely. And no, the city has not done enough. The corruption, as the U.S. Attorney said, is prolific. And the city council has not been involved because we are not involved in the RFP process, the bidding process, and as a matter of fact, I got thrown out of the procurement office when I was trying to investigate a contract that was given and wanted to understand what the bidding process was, what the scoring process was, and I was told that I was not allowed to see that. We have a situation where we don't just do an audit. I will bring in a procurement officer, head of procurement, who has been head of procurement at a publicly traded company so that every procurement has been scrutinized by not only management but also shareholders. I am talking with companies right now, there are ways that you can produce procurement, a process that is a double-blind process, so you don't have this. When we send bids back, that is unbelievable. It is capricious when companies have spent tens of thousands of dollars to prepare documents. And I've talked on this campaign trail with companies who've have had to submit those documents 3 or 4 times. The second part of your question, which is, have I personally tried to do something about this? Recently, several months ago, the City Council was asked to have the procurement person from each operating department, each division, be transferred to the Office of Procurement. I was one of 2 council members who voted against that because of 2 reasons. Number one, it was even more consolidation of power into the procurement department. And secondly, a procurement person for police or for sanitation needs to actually be in that department to be able to direct what the next offer ought to be.
Yeah, let me get Monica Pearson in here.
Okay, go ahead.
But my question has to do with, since we're talking about the problems with the airport contracts, many of them aren't up until late in 2018. Would either of you support a moratorium on those contracts until we can figure out what's going on?
Yes, and I already have. I'm already on record doing that. Yes, ma'am.
And what I believe, Monica, is that when you look at corporations, when you look at Target, when you look at Equifax, when you look at corporations that have had challenges, they don't stop doing business. But I also think the fact that the U.S. Attorney's Office is in City Hall is a problem. And I think that means that we have to make sure we have safeguards in place. And I'm very excited. This afternoon, I will be releasing my complete plan for overhauling the procurement department. And it will include an independent evaluation of any donor to a campaign, that this donor will have to go through an independent evaluation before receiving a contract within City Hall. I think that we have to have layer upon layer upon layer of security as it relates to our procurement process.
So let me follow up, if I may, with each of you, because the Atlanta Constitution on Sunday ran a major piece that you're both very well aware of, which focused on issues that the reporters felt each of you had to deal with in terms of transparency and ethics. Ms. Bottoms, there are questions about you, and you know that there's been an ethics investigation on this, is on the fact that you've kind of lumped in all the people who you're paying to do work for your campaign without specifying who each of them is individually, so we're not quite sure who's doing what, and who those companies and individuals are. And Ms. Norwood, as you know, there have been questions about how you have divided the time of City Hall workers on your staff and their involvement in your campaign. So let me ask each of you to kind of address those, since ethics is such a huge issue in this race. Ms. Bottoms?
Well, I do think that transparency is important, and that's why I've already gone back online, and today you can go online and you can see a complete itemization of each of those payments. I have an incredibly talented campaign team, a team primarily led by women with no campaign experience. And so my team, the person doing my disclosures, had never done disclosures before and simply put together campaign staff in one line item. That was just a bookkeeping error that needed to be corrected. That information has been corrected and is available online. But I want to correct you. There is no formal investigation by the ethics department. And in fact, I've never been under investigation by any ethics department. And so that information has been corrected. And to make sure that we have an extra layer, I've now brought onto my team a former head of the State Ethics Commission to assist with all future filings to make sure there are no questions.
Is it fair, though, at least to say that you now, with your experience in city government, that this is something that you could have easily been aware of sooner and shouldn't have had to have been brought to your attention by reporters for a newspaper?
Well, you know, Bill, in the course of a campaign, obviously we're all very busy during the course of the campaign and we aren't perfect. But it doesn't mean that there's not a process that requires us to be more prudent. And so in the spirit of the process, we are allowed to amend our disclosures, and that amendment has been made, and it's open and transparent, and it's available online.
And let me just to follow up and then turn it back over to Jim and Monica. Ms. Norwood, what about the fact that there seems to be questions about the borders between staff work for City Hall and your campaign workers?
Well, the two individuals who are working on the campaign, who have been with me at City Hall, have kept meticulous records, and that's what we showed to the AJC when they came and talked with us. And then that was then vetted, and on Sunday in the AJC, it said that keeping a meticulous journal of the time that you spent on each was an appropriate way of making sure that you weren't using city resources.
These were handwritten notes that each of your staffers had.
It's a ledger. It's a ledger. It's not. It's very detailed. And so what I have said repeatedly is the reason that I have chosen to have City Hall employees be also involved in campaign is because I have represented the whole city for 12 years. The people who are working with me on the campaign know the constituents. When you are running a grassroots campaign across the entire city, as I am, with relationships that are 10, 20, 30 years deep, I want people who know those people intimately. So we made that choice. We have been meticulous in making sure that no city resources are used.
You look like you wanted to respond.
Sure. I just wanted to point out, as it relates to the AJC story, I believe it noted that that was brought to our campaign's attention on November 16th. And less than 2 weeks later, we have made all of those corrections, and they are available online. And I also want to note that I do have someone from my staff who works on my campaign, and she is on unpaid leave while she's working on my campaign.
Well, I have to ask about something that is concerning to me, and that is the commercials that we're hearing, because I think that says something about ethics also. Just this morning, I heard spots on Black radio that were basically saying, you know, this woman does not support the Black community. But in the same vein, I have gone and heard commercials and seen a spot, I think, on your page where you are saying, or someone is implying, that you have been endorsed by someone who has said, I'm staying out of this. Vincent Ford has said, I'm staying out of this. Can you control the Democratic Party and their message, which is becoming very racist?
Well, I would disagree that it's becoming racist. I think the racial conversation has been interjected into this campaign. And it's
by the party.
Well, it's been interjected when you have an inability, like my opponent, to recognize that racial profiling exists. It's interjected when you have an inability to denounce President Trump, like my opponent did. An inability to denounce a man who's profiling black and brown people across this country through immigration stops right here in the suburbs of Atlanta. And so I think it's a conversation that's been interjected, and also the subtleties of this conversation, that somehow you can't have anything and be a part of government and not be corrupt. I think that's a narrative that's placed on urban governments across this nation. And so I think we can't ignore what the conversations are around the dinner table.
But those parts aren't running on white radio, and that's being run by the Democratic Party. And you don't feel any responsibility for saying that's not right?
I think the Democratic Party has a right to point out issues that have been discussed in this campaign.
So the issue is you're not responsible.
Jim, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, if I could, and this is kind of an extension of the same discussion. Ms. Norwood, it has become public that last June you told a group that you were speaking to that in 2009, before and after balloting closed, the Kasim Reed campaign engaged in some questionable practices to secure his victory in the runoff. You have said that you regret the recording was made public. I have a different question. You have participated in scores of forums during this mayoral campaign, but you chose to express these concerns in detail to only one group, and that was the Buckhead Young Republicans.
I want to exercise moderator prerogative just for a moment, because I want to make sure that the people who are watching and listening to the debate understand the context of all this. What Monica was talking about was the fact that the state Democratic Party has run any number of commercials trying to paint you, Mary Norwood, as a Republican. And there have been suggestions, and Monica certainly is aware of them, that this is racial coding, that not only is it terrible to be a Republican, they're suggesting, but that the Republican Party, it tends to be a white-based party, and so that there's a racial inference in all of this. And I want to make sure that our folks are aware of that as you go ahead and answer the question that Jim asked, which is relevant if the only place you're talking about that is in front of a group of white Buckhead Republicans.
There are several things to say. Number one, I actually am an independent. And that conversation, the conversation about the campaign in 2009, I've had with numerous groups. And I said in my response after this came out, I talked about this to the NAACP in the past 2 weeks. I have talked about the irregularities that I uncovered that I could prove, and I talked about the irregularities that I suspected. I've talked about that for years, but I never went public in an open forum across the United States of America because I felt it would be damaging to our city and its reputation.
So why did you bring it up now?
Monica, I was asked about whether or not, and this was not necessarily because they were young Republicans, when I have been asked about do I think that the 2017 election will be a fair election, I have said I saw some things that I was concerned about in 2009. Rather than to go public and to damage Atlanta's reputation possibly, what I did was to bide my time, and when a position became available on the Board of Elections, I was appointed to that board. I brought in a new elections director, Rick Barron, who I have a great deal of confidence in. He's a consummate professional. All 5 members of the board, including Reverend Dr. Gerald Durley, were all approved his confirmation to appointment to the board. So what I said in this group was to refer back to say, I am so pleased that I was able to assist in making sure that we got the right leadership at Fulton County so that in 2017 we could have an election that I would have more confidence in.
I think Ms. Bottoms would like to
I'd like
jump
to
in here.
respond to that just to be very clear with the audience on what happened. The recording began before the Young Republicans with, I hope that you're not recording this. So it was a secret tape that someone recorded. And then the language, the coded language, Monica, that you talk about that the Democratic Party has referenced, referred to people on housing vouchers, people from housing projects, the thugs coming in to vote illegally, the felons, the people who were committing felonies, the people who were being paid to vote. The coded language was related to African Americans who exercised their lawful right to vote. And my opponent, in a secret tape, disparaged lawful voters, African American voters.
I would love to hear you two talk about this a little more because it's clearly a big issue.
No, this is important. This is very important. Let me be very clear. When I was on the Board of Elections, it was presented to the Elections Board 111 people who crossed over jurisdictional lines to go back and vote from a public housing address that no longer existed. And I, as a member of that board, said, I do not want to prosecute these people. I will vote no to go after these individuals. And I turned to Dr. Durley and I said, Dr. Durley, it was not the nice people who had moved to an apartment with a voucher outside the city who I consider having done something. They are not the culprit. The culprit was whoever found the housing authority list and went to them and said, we need you to come back in and vote on Tuesday. You used to live at this address.
You called them
we need
thugs.
you. We need you. Someone who goes to an apartment and coerces an individual to come back in and vote illegally. Ms. Bottoms, that is not a nice person.
Did you use the word thug? Did you call them thugs?
Ms. Bottoms, your coding and my coding are different.
Did you call them thugs?
Ms. Bottoms?
Did you call them thugs?
Thugs does not mean African American, Ms. Bottoms. Thug means unethical behavior, and it is unethical for someone to coerce a nice person of whatever background, whatever nationality, and to coerce them into committing a crime in order to affect the outcome of a vote.
I want to jump in because I think you've both made clear where you are on this. But Monica, I do think, before we get off this completely, and we got a lot more ground to cover, nevertheless, you started a conversation. We are seeing in this election, perhaps more so than 2009 and other races, and maybe partly by an accident of geography, where you have one candidate from Southwest Atlanta, the other from North Atlanta, Buckhead area. You concerned about how race is playing an issue in this, and what it means in terms of coming together once one of them becomes mayor?
Well, my question, to be quite honest, is, we saw, if you look at the voting from November, black people voted for black people, white people voted for white people, and yes, you had some shifting back and forth. But the reality is, how will you appeal to those people on the north side? What do you have to offer them? And how will you appeal to people on the south side? Kathy Woolard and Vincent Ford basically got more votes put together than the leader. So what are you doing? Because if we don't cross this racial divide, it's going to continue, and that's not good for the community.
Can we give you the first shot at this, Ms. Bottoms? Because if I'm keeping track accurately, I think we owe you a little bit of time.
Thank you.
So how do we cross this racial divide?
It is an unfortunate divide in Atlanta in 2017, and it's unfortunate that it's been interjected in so many ways. But the reality, Monica, is that in 2017, we are still having such issues with race because it is trickling down from our national politics, from our president, who on just yesterday used a disparaging term towards Native Americans. So it's a very real issue in this city, and that's why it's important that we know who our candidates are and where they align their politics. Now, as it relates to relating to the entire city, I've said this on multiple times, because of my background in this city, because of all the challenges and opportunities that I've had in this city to become a professional in this city, coming from a single mother, coming from someone who visited her father in prison on weekends, graduating at the top of my college class, graduating from law school in this city, I am trained, and I also have the ability to sit around a table just like this on Bankhead and understand the challenges that families are facing and actually do real work to address it. In the very same way that I have the ability to sit in a boardroom with executives from Buckhead and address those issues as well, in the same way that I was able to facilitate the sale and transition of Turner Field.
Let's let Ms. Norwood.
I'm not hearing specifics. I want to know what you are going to do to help heal this divide. What programs, what things are you going to do in the black community and the white community to work together?
Could I once again give Mary Norwood a chance to weigh in first, and then go to that next round?
I'm asking Mary that.
Okay.
Ms. Norwood that also.
Thank you.
What are you going to do on the South Side?
Well, my campaign has been a campaign of unity and unification. Period. Today, we were endorsed by every one of the unions. That is a workforce in Atlanta that is predominantly African American, and I am delighted to have had the endorsement of the city workers. We were endorsed by a dozen individuals, community leaders, and the vast majority of them were African American today. I have represented the entire city for 3 terms. I have support. There are Mary Norwood yard signs and Mary Norwood supporters in every single zip code, every single NPU, every single council district. I have represented the entire city. And more specifically to your question, I know that the strength of the city is in our communities and in our neighborhoods. I come out of the NPU system. I was on 2 different NPU boards. I was part of APAB. I was part of the National Association of Neighborhoods and National League of Cities. I come from the neighborhoods and communities.
Let me jump in and ask a final question with like a 30-second at most response, and then Jim Galloway, we need you to move on to other subjects. But I do want to ask this one quick question to close off this portion of the conversation. Each of you, please tell me whether you believe we are going to come out of this election more united or more divided as a city, and how much work is going to need to be done to bring us back together. Ms. Bottoms?
I think we will come out more united, because that is who we are as Atlanta. And we talk about support across the city. I'm very proud to have gotten support from several in-town representatives, including Jason Carter, including Elena Parent, Nan Orick, and I can go on and on with that list. So I think that at the end of the day, when you are in the middle of a campaign, I think it's important that we have conversations that people are having within their communities. There is a racial conversation going on in our communities, and I think that conversation is an important conversation, because if we ignore it, we can't address that issue.
Ms. Norwood, I think in a way you've already answered the question, but go ahead and take the 30 seconds to wrap it up for us.
What everyone in our town wants is a good quality of life. They want a good school for their children. They want their children to get an excellent education. They want their neighborhoods crime-free. They want their neighborhoods preserved and protected. They want to be able to age in place with dignity and security. They want a great future for our city. We want transit. We want sustainability, connectivity, mobility. That's what's important. And when I am out in communities, our communities do not have this divide that we're talking about now. This has been injected into into this campaign, and it is a mass distraction from the corruption and who is going to clean up City Hall and who is going to bring the transparency that we desperately need in this city.
Thank you.
Was that longer than 30 seconds?
Yes,
it was quite a bit longer. Jim Galloway.
Okay,
by the way, I'm told by our control room that you've had about equal time, and I want to make sure that our listeners as well as the two of you know that. Jim?
All right, we're going to move on, but not too far, okay? So endorsement, as you two have mentioned, mean a great deal in a very short runoff. And from here, both of you head to the Carter Center, where you're going to sit down with Kathy Woolard, who came in third in the November 7th race, and presumably sometimes afterwards, she'll make an endorsement there. So, Ms. Bottoms, you've already been endorsed by former Atlanta Mayor Andrew Young, and you have the support of the current incumbent, Kasim Reed. Ms. Norwood, you have been endorsed by City Council President Cesar Mitchell, and most recently, Shirley Franklin and Peter Amon. So if both of you could tell me, tell voters what those endorsements mean. You're the traffic cop.
Well, let's start with Mary Norwood, because I think Keisha Bottoms has had more beginnings.
Okay, all right. Okay, there we go.
It means the world to me. It is absolutely, I am so honored to have former Mayor Shirley Franklin, along with Council President Cesar Mitchell and Peter Amon, and today former Fulton County Chair, as of right now, John Eves. So those four endorsements speak volumes, because they transcend. They are looking at the person that they believe is best suited to clean up the corruption, bring the transparency and accountability to the city, has the understanding of the entire city, and will be the most responsible and the most responsive mayor. So it is absolutely a real shot in the arm for this city and unity that I have been endorsed by a wonderfully diverse group of very, very important leaders in our town.
Ms. Bottoms?
I think it's an honor to receive an endorsement from anyone. I received one today from Senator Kamala Harris. And that's an honor, of course, that she feels that my campaign is one worth standing with. But at the end of the day, Ambassador Young will go to vote, and he will cast one vote in the same way that the person will come in this studio and clean up this studio tonight and have the ability to go and cast one vote. At the end of the day, it's about the voters, and it's about the people. Government is for the people, and it's not about the who says who. It's about who the people go and vote for, and that's why it's important that people exercise that right. If I had rested on endorsements going into the general election, I would not have come out on top during that election. But I'm grateful for the support, because that means it's one more vote that I can count.
Well, one of the things that I keep hearing from the people who listen to my radio station and send me emails, it doesn't matter whether they live in the city, they live in the county, or they live out in the state, the rural areas. Crime is a big issue. And we are losing more police officers, sheriffs, deputies, so on and so forth. The governor did give a 20% raise to state law enforcement, which included Georgia State Patrol and DNR. But now the Sheriff's Association is actually going to go to the legislature and ask for a 0.5 or 1% sales tax to supplement police and sheriff salaries all across the state. Looking at your legislative package, and I'm sure you both are putting them together. Looking at your legislative package, would this be something you would support? If not, why not?
A mandatory minimum wage.
Well, they're two different things. Some have asked for a mandatory minimum wage. The Sheriff's Association is just saying, give us a 1% sales tax. That money will be apportioned out to departments based upon their need. Not only the sheriff's offices, but also in local police departments. Because in rural Georgia, you got small forces where they don't have any money, small tax base.
This would be QBE for cops.
Yes.
Yes, I hear you.
So, your feelings about it, please.
Well, I want to say that I have gotten the endorsement of both.
No. I'm going to stop you.
Okay.
I want both of you to stop telling me the party line. I want you to tell me directly, will you support this? And if not, why not? Or I want to know, are you going to help police officers get more money?
And that's what let me start over.
Thank you.
I submitted the legislation to get the police officers the raises that they had been denied because the administration was unhappy with the unions, and it was taken out on the men and women of the force. It took me a year and a half to get those raises, and we did not get the final piece, which are the officers on the street. There were adjustments made to the budget back in June, and the only piece that was left out was the Mary Norwood legislation. Our officers deserved it. Our officers will get it if I'm the next mayor.
And for the state, would that be part of your legislative package?
Absolutely.
Ms. Bottoms?
I would certainly welcome any support that the city can get to pay our officers more money. And there are also things that we can do to help our officers today, and we don't have to wait on the state. We can certainly look at providing funding for housing, education stipends, and we can also make sure that we are working with our partners like we're currently doing to expand our camera integration system throughout the city. I think there are technology changes that we can make, but also, Monica, we have to make sure that our city is affordable for our officers to live in the city of Atlanta. Right now, we only have about 20% of our workforce of our police officers who live in the city because they cannot afford to live in the city. So this is an issue that's impacting everything, including where our officers want to live and work, because if they live in the city, they have an opportunity to take home a car each day, which helps with our communities.
I apologize. Well, let me, if I can, move on, unless you have something that has to be said.
Well, just with officers living in the city, I have served as the co-chair of the Code Enforcement Commission, and it took us 2 years to get the law changed so our abandoned, blighted houses can now be renovated and officers can live in them in the community.
Thank you for that. That opens up affordable housing as an important discussion in this debate. And if we could start with Ms. Bottoms, it would be great.
Well, okay, we've got a situation where we've got this wonderful thing called the Beltline that's now under construction. We have housing springing up right and left, and lo and behold, the housing that's springing up is not going to be filled by janitors, by fast food workers, by waiters, by waitresses. You're going to have a pretty darn good job in order to live along the Beltline. How do we fix that, or should it be fixed? I guess. Should it be fixed, and how do you fix it?
We absolutely have to fix it. The affordability challenge, the equity challenge that we have in this city is really disgraceful right now. And that's why when I finished with the transaction related to Turner Field, I worked with the City of Atlanta and our public and private partners to establish a displacement-free fund in Vine City English Avenue that helps pay rising property taxes for people in that community so that people can afford to stay in the city. But as mayor, I will take it one step further. I've announced a $1 billion affordability plan, $500 million in private investment, $500 million in public investment, and that includes buying up housing stock and putting people in the houses who can, so that our city can be affordable for everyone.
And one thing I have not heard from you yet, and maybe you've said it elsewhere, where does that $500 million in public money come from?
It's a combination, Jim. When you look at what we own from the City of Atlanta, the Recreation Authority, the Housing Authority, the Beltline, all of our public partners, what I found when I was at the Recreation Authority is that we don't even have a good handle on what we own in this city. And I know that because we would get calls about property and lots that people were interested in purchasing, and we didn't know that we owned it. So I think the first step is to make sure that we have a complete inventory list, and then make sure that we are able to make that land available and these properties available so that they can be redeveloped with private dollars, and they can be designated as permanent affordable housing so that people who, postal workers, teachers, police officers, can actually buy and afford to live in the city of Atlanta.
Before we move on, I think we just need to give a little bit of reality here. Poverty line is $24,000. We've got 24% of the people in Atlanta living on the poverty line. The average income, per capita household income, is like $47,000. So I'm trying to fix my mind about how much is this house going to cost when you're talking about people only making $47,000 a year.
Well, it's a very similar program to what we've done in pockets. We've done it in Mechanicsville. We did it in conjunction with Pulte Homes and the Atlanta Police Foundation, where we went to a private partner. We built some housing, and then they essentially have a 15-year lease to purchase plan. So they are buying these houses, these modestly priced homes at today's rates, and they have 15 years to purchase it. And it's a similar plan that we need to expand throughout the city. We didn't say it would be easy, but it's necessary, because not only are we trying to catch up, but we need to get ahead of the curve as it relates to affordability.
So the notion, Ms. Norwood, of a $1 billion investment going toward affordable housing, it seems to be a bold plan. Is your opponent realistic in wanting to offer that? And is that something that you think would be a good idea?
I have yet to understand exactly how these numbers all add up. $500 million in public money, $500 million in private money. At one time, my opponent was talking about Turner Field, where the $300 million plus in Turner Field is not all affordable housing. So what is that affordable housing component that is this big, you know, in the broad scheme of things? What I know is important is to do things right now. Number one, we have the Housing Authority, which has not built any affordable housing in the past administration. There are 300 acres of land that belongs to the Housing Authority. So if we want to do true affordability and very low income, as you're talking about, we need to do that. That is number one. Number two, this sale of Turner Field, where now we're selling it to the Housing Authority and they're spending the sale of the Civic Center, we're selling it to the Housing Authority, they're spending $31 million. All we needed to do was to have an RFP that said to a private developer, you have to have this much affordable housing at this AMI. So the idea that we're taking money from the Housing Authority that could go straight to affordable housing, and it just, there's a lot of, there is a shell game going on that's unbelievable. The next thing is that we need employer-assisted workforce housing, because one of the things that we can do is publicly and privately is to have people who are workers at a lower wage be able to live near where they work.
That leads me into I want to ask a very blunt question.
Yes.
Atlanta, the business community here is all about growth. We pride ourselves in attracting people from all over the country to live here, attracting business. Amazon, we hope, will come here. Is there really, do you believe, a genuine interest on behalf of all of the interests that'll have to come together to do something about affordable housing, and in fact, beyond that, to really do something about poverty in this city? Do you find I get this is a very broad, general question, but I will tell you sometimes I'm not sure those are issues that are on the table at all.
It absolutely is of interest to everyone, and I know that from talking with people across the city. And I do just want to address one thing as it relates to the Civic Center and with Turner Field. A percentage at the Civic Center, 30% set aside for affordable housing, 20% at Turner Field. Those are intentional set-asides because we have to be more deliberate and more forceful in how we are setting it aside, because we don't want to go back to the antiquated model of mass housing projects in the city of Atlanta, because it's not good for the communities. It's not good for the people living in pockets of poverty in that way.
I don't know. I see that we're a boom town and we're concerned about, you know, building and growing. I'm not sure I see that concern.
Well, may I finish and tell you what the conversations I've had across this city as it relates to the issue of affordability. It's not just people who are struggling to live in this city who are interested, but I'm also hearing it from business owners. I had a conversation with a business owner who talked about how people who work in his business don't have 24-hour transportation to get to and from work. He has a 24-hour operation, and they can't afford to live in the city of Atlanta, so it's impacting his bottom line. So he's interested, and people who have moved to the city of Atlanta because of its diversity don't like that it's no longer a diverse city socio-economically.
Take a quick shot at this, and we got another question we got to get in here.
When we talk about the Beltline, and yes, we've got an issue with gentrification, and a lot of that happened on the east side of the Beltline. That was a lot of that was during the 4 years that I wasn't at City Hall. But it only touches 45 neighborhoods. There are 242 neighborhoods in the city. It does not touch west of West End and Westview Cemetery. It doesn't touch north of Piedmont Hospital. It doesn't touch south of University Drive. It doesn't touch east of Old Fourth Ward. So you have an awful lot of the city. And because I know it all so well, I know that what we really need is a mayor who is marketing the entire city, a mayor who believes in the Atlanta design plan that Ryan Gravel and Tim Keene have put together, which is to densify along our commercial corridors, preserve and protect our neighborhoods and communities so there isn't displacement. And then we need to do the things that are very important to keep seniors and others of low income in their houses.
I'm going to jump in because we're getting very close to the time we promised to give you each a closing statement. Jim, one of the issues that you've raised, we have a statewide audience following us on the web and on Facebook right now. And one of the things that you've expressed concern about is the fact that we had Mayor Reed and Governor Deal in a very collegial collaboration in working for the interests of the city and the state together.
A first-of-its-kind pioneering alliance.
And you're worried about what?
Well, the question is, will the next mayor of Atlanta continue that? You've got several moving parts here. You've got a new mayor of Atlanta coming in, whoever she may be, and you will have in 14 months you will have a new governor of Georgia. How do you go about preserving that alliance?
And Jim, what I think is so important about that is when we talk in these terms that this campaign has devolved into about R's and D's and reds and blues and coding, it is so harmful for the next mayor to be able to deal with a Republican, possibly, state government and a Republican national government. We need to be very thoughtful. The mayor of Atlanta needs to have the kind of relationship to be able to get tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to this city to help it in its transportation initiatives, in the important infrastructure projects. And so I have remained and always have been an independent so that I can effectively work on both sides of the aisle.
If I could follow up here, Ms. Bottoms, the incumbent mayor, Kasim Reed, is very much a Democrat, but he seems to have succeeded in his relationship with Deal nonetheless.
Yes, and I think that it's important to be authentic and not hide behind who you are and what your positions are. And so when you do things in secrecy and you speak in one way before one group of people, a group of Republicans, and you speak in another way before another group, a group of Democrats, then I do think that that impacts your credibility. But I think that anything less than the relationship that we've seen in the cooperation between the city and state really would be a failure at this point. We've seen that it benefits the city when we are working on behalf of the state, and it benefits the state when the state is working on behalf of the city. But I think that the first thing that you have to do is everyone has to know where you stand, and you don't have secret conversations that can be misunderstood or misconstrued in front of one group or the other. I'm a Democrat, lifelong Democrat, and when I walk into the Republican Capitol, I'll make that known, and then we will deal with our business in the way that benefits both the city and the state.
Let me ask you a quick question about that. Presumably, if you become mayor of the city, you are going to have to develop a relationship with the administration in Washington. You are going to be able to deal with the White House. You have made it clear that you believe your opponent refuses to speak out against President Trump as you have, but you're going to have to be able to work with those people if you end up in the White House to get some of the things for the city you want. How do you do that, having attacked, essentially, your opponent for not being strong enough in her criticism of them?
Because I can't be silent. I can't trust my children's future to silence. In very the same way that Ivan Allen went and testified before Congress when it was not a popular thing to do and supported the Civil Rights Act. It's the same way that we are called as leaders to call out what is wrong. The policies of President Trump are wrong. The immigration policies of President Trump are wrong. The policies of President Trump as it relates to racial profiling, as it relates to expansion of Medicaid in the state is wrong. And so I will never sit silent, and I will never do it as a matter of convenience or as a matter of party affiliation.
You want to respond?
Yes, I would like to respond because I have endured half-truths slanderous comments, and falsehoods that are impacting not only me, but this city. And it is disheartening, it is divisive, it is demeaning, and I am appalled that even after being told the truth, the mischaracterizations continue.
Mischaracterizations of what?
Of who I am and what I stand for. When you look at what the Georgia Democratic Party vote builder said on the 9th of October, is Mary Norwood's voting record leans Democratic. Let's be very clear. I am progressive in every sense of the word, and the fact that I am being maligned with a label that itself is being maligned. I have stood firm against any bigotry, any white supremacy, any violation of anyone's rights, and I have a 25-year history of that. So, Atlantans and others, I want you to understand that this is alarming, that in politics, this kind of mischaracterization is considered
Norwood,
fair game.
May I respond to that? Speaking of personal mischaracterization, you have run ads disparaging me, disparaging my ability to lead this city based upon corruption. You have nothing to base that upon other than the fact that my husband and I are both accomplished professionals. We have publicly disclosed every asset that we have, unlike you. You've hidden your assets in family trust. You have not put it on your financial disclosures. You have paid your own company from your city council account. You have reimbursed your husband from your city council account. And yet you sit here and you claim that you are personally offended. What offends me, Ms. Norwood, is that I've never been accused of corruption, yet you run television ads accusing me of corruption. What is that based upon?
Hey, you two, I'm going to say this. When I saw two women as the people who were going to run for the mayor of the city of Atlanta, I did not expect to see what I'm seeing right now.
Me neither.
And I really want to get back to the issues. You two are acting like your typical Republican, Democratic, and independent men. I expected higher quality out of the two of you. So let's go to an issue that we all deal with every day.
By the way, we have about, whatever it is, we got about 3 minutes to deal with it.
So we need to deal with that. What is your plan to help alleviate the mess we have in Atlanta?
I think we owe Ms. Bottoms about a minute, so let her begin.
And let's not do the backbiting anymore. We don't need that. We need issues.
Well, and you're right, Monica. We don't, but it's important because these are things that are being discussed, and we opened up talking about what's on television and what's on radio, and so we can't ignore it. And
so let's
it
talk about traffic in the small amount of time.
I'll be happy to talk about traffic and our need to expand rail throughout the city of Atlanta, including expanding light rail throughout the city of Atlanta, heavy rail throughout the city of Atlanta. And I also think that we have to be innovative in our approach. When we look at cities in the Northeast and we see how they've used commercial rail lines and they've used them for public railways, I think that that's one way that we can look at expansion as we continue to push for regional funding and cooperation.
If I could interrupt here, several times I've heard you say that you want to put rail where it's not just where it's not just convenient, and by that I presume you mean Southwest Atlanta. Is that correct?
You're going to have about 30 seconds on that because we're running short on time.
I push for expansion of light rail into Southwest Atlanta specifically because it's important that we connect rail in our city with corridors of our city where people need public transportation. Southwest Atlanta is one of those corridors. Right now, there's not a heavy rail station. There's not access to light rail. You have many people in the service industry who are relying on public transportation. And primarily, I'm thinking about the 18-year-old who's sitting at the bus stop at 3 a.m. so that she can make it to work by 6 a.m. And I think that when we expand rail throughout our communities, that you will also see a build out of our communities, because so much of our growth is around
We've got
transit.
about a minute for you to offer your thoughts.
I just want to say, talking about communities where we don't have the light rail already, we can do neighborhood circulators. We can do trolleys. We can do bus rapid transit. There are lots of ways that we can get people to their work very quickly. I've talked with MARTA about having a system that is that uses Uber, but at a MARTA rate, so that it can go and pick people up and get them to where they need to go. We need to know that with our transit and our transportation system, that we right-size it and design it correctly for the demand that is there and for the demand that is coming, both in the city and in the region. And that is why I will have a transportation department. I will have a transportation cabinet level person to bring together the different parts of transportation. So whether that is building out the paths, whether it's building out the Beltline and the 5 transit lines, whether it's...
Yes. I've got to jump in.
Yes,
because
sir.
we promised each of you 1 minute to make a closing statement, and I want to make sure you each have that. And as long as the ball's in your court, Ms. Norwood, please take a minute, and I am going to time you on this.
All right. I'm Mary Norwood, and I want to be your mayor. I want to run your city with 100% transparency, accountability, and honesty. I want to make sure that we are all as proud of our city as we are of the people that are in our city. I say that our city is better than our politics. Never has that been proven more true than in this very torturous campaign season. But you know me. You know my values. You know my history. You know the work I've done for you. I want to be your mayor. As I said yesterday at the press conference, if you make me mayor, I will make all of us proud in the city of Atlanta.
Thank you, Ms. Norwood. Keisha Lance Bottoms.
I am Keisha Lance Bottoms, and I am Atlanta. I am all that we can hope Atlanta to be. I'm a product of the Atlanta public school system. I graduated from Douglas High School, finishing law school, the daughter of a single mother, going on to practice law, to be an attorney, and to be a representative on the Atlanta City Council. But there's nothing that I am more proud of than being the mother of 4 children. And those 4 children are the reason that I am running for mayor. My children are the reason that I want Atlanta to be a better place for all of our children, for all of our communities, in the same way that it was for me when my family faced very challenging times. I look forward to continuing the progress of this city, the great work and redevelopment that we see going on throughout this city. But our communities can never and will never be left behind under my administration. I know what it means to have a city and a community surrounding you and believing that you are better than your circumstances, and that's what I look forward to doing as mayor.
Thank you, Keisha Lance Bottoms. Thank you, Mary Norwood, for joining us today. Jim Galloway, my partner and Political Rewind, thank you for being here in the middle of your vacation. Thanks for coming.
It's like radio, except on TV.
Monica Pearson, you have not lost any of the feistiness that you always displayed.
Well, truth in advertising, I cannot vote in the city of Atlanta. I own property, but I can't vote.
Thank you so much for your participation.
You're welcome.
And thank you to our listeners on 88.5 in Atlanta. We appreciate your being with us, and to our statewide audience watching on GPB.org or on the GPB Facebook page. We hope that if you're around the state, you have heard things and seen things today that make you understand how important the mayor of Atlanta is to all of us in the state. 1 week from today will be Election Day. Early voting has already begun. So if you are a registered voter in the city, we urge you to go out and vote. Political Rewind will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock. We'll take a look at how this debate unfolded, and our panel will weigh in. Theron Johnson, Democrat, will be here tomorrow. Todd Ream, Republican, will be here, and so will Jim Galloway's colleague, Greg Bluestein, to assess the race. And from Washington, Tamar Hallerman, weighing in on a rather busy week at the United States Capitol. I'm Bill Nigut. Thanks to all of you for being with us. See you again tomorrow at 2 for Political Rewind.